Appreciate you joining us in the trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics. As always, coming to you from our outstanding studios. And man, this will be worth your time because a really, really good guest, honest, open. Bengals head coach Zac Taylor. He's one of my favorites for sure, and he lived up to my expectations. He talked about last season, the trials and tribulations of the season, having to deal with two quarterbacks and how putting game plans together that suited two different quarterbacks, things you decide to do and not decide to do, everything that went along with that. And we talk about last year. We talk about the free agency period. We talk about the upcoming draft. There's not much that we don't talk about with Zac Taylor, and he answers everything. And like I said, answers it very, very honestly. You're going to enjoy this. What did you make a great decision to join us in the trenches today? Brought to you by First Star Logistics, as always, in our outstanding First Star Logistics studios, because we've got Bengals head coach Zac Taylor is our special guest today. And Coach, I know the season ended a little prematurely than you wanted it to, but overall, first of all, thank you and welcome to the show here. And what do you think? I mean, when you reflect back on the 2023-2024 season, what did you like most about your Cincinnati Bengals football team?
Well, this team fought through a lot of adversity, which I expected them to. Learned a lot about just overall, a lot of guys on our team, a lot of young guys on our team that are going to be big impacts in our future. And, we were out of it sooner than we wanted to be, obviously. But I think there's a lot of encouraging things going into this offseason and next year that we're going to be really excited about.
You look at it, I guess the other question that on the flip side of it, what do you think you could have done better, if anything?
Well, I think there's some games that got away from us. Obviously in the division, we got to play better. That's the expectation we have on ourselves. Forget about what everybody else's expectations are. We have to fare better in the division. And we didn't live up to that standard. And really that's what takes you out of the equation, is just going 1-5 in the division. And you can't have much bigger expectations if you're going to have that record in there to go to the playoffs and do all the things you want to do. You got to handle your division. We didn't do that, and so that's the first place you can look at.
When you look at it, I mean, everybody around the league that I talked to, like, man, Cincinnati Bengals had a hell of a year, because how many franchises around the National Football League could lose an elite quarterback, with basically 8 games to play, lose them early in the Baltimore game with 7+ games to play, and play the way they played with a backup quarterback down the stretch? Everybody thought it's over, folded up. I mean, the Bengals are out of it. And for the team to compete the way it did, for you guys to prepare them the way you did, your quarterback room, I mean, you've got an elite guy, Joe Burrow is your starter. You have an elite backup quarterback, maybe the best in the league in both areas there. That's an amazing quarterback room that you've built there, Coach.
There's certainly some silver linings you have to look at, and so that's the way we choose to look at it, is we get to see find out a lot more about Jake Browning, which you can't say with confidence. You know exactly what you have until they go out there in a game and have to lead this team and in front of a stadium full of people and do all the things that Jake did for us this year. So that part turned out to be very encouraging, what we've got there in Jake, and so now you got a lot of confidence in your backup quarterback, and so and the team sees that as well. If God forbid you ever needed him, hopefully for just a short stint, if that were to ever happen, you've got a lot of confidence that Jake can step in and keep the thing moving.
The chemistry and culture in the quarterback room that you guys have built is dynamic also. I mean, I guess you're never going to take that for granted, are you?
No, that's important. Those guys spend a lot of time together, and things got to run smoothly with the quarterback coach and the coordinator and the starting quarterback and the backup quarterback and whoever the third quarterback is you can't have any disruption in that room. And so those guys, the chemistry is very strong. They support each other. They help each other. And we know that we have a really, really strong quarterback room.
So let's take a look at some of the things that are so impressive. The 9-8 season, obviously, first and foremost, that's the third straight winning season. That's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, that's tough to do in the National Football League. 26 takeaways, just barely out of the top 10, tied for 11th in the NFL, 17 interceptions, tied for 8th in the league. Some of those interceptions came in the red zone. We'll get to that, a little bit. 16 giveaways in 17 games, tied for 2nd in the NFL, plus 10 in the turnover ratio, top 5, tied for 5th in the National Football League. 10 fumbles, 2nd fewest in the NFL, only lost 2 of them, fewest in the National Football League. 76 penalties, 2nd fewest in the league. 614 penalty yards, fewest in the NFL. Red zone, 12 possessions with no points. That led the National Football League. 1 out of every 5 possessions the opponent doesn't score. Top 5 in the National Football League. I mean, there's some pretty good stuff there, Coach. There's a lot of reasons you went 9-8, obviously.
Yeah, there's reasons we had opportunities to have a successful year, and just more consistency over the course of the season. Last year we won 10 games in a row, and we were never able to hit a stretch like that where you really get that momentum. And you felt really good about things kind of going into that Baltimore game where Joe got hurt. We had a little bit of that momentum. We'd won 4 in a row.
Yep.
Got beat at the last second there by Houston. And so that stretch right there, you felt like you were really gaining some momentum. And then, you had the setback with Joe, and then we started to gain some momentum with Jake. We won 3 games in a row there in December before coming up short, in a couple of those games there at the end. So there were some stretches there where we started to find that momentum and then had those setbacks. But to have a great year, you've got to find a longer stretch of that momentum where you're playing really good football in all those areas you mentioned. So
Jake, as a starting quarterback, he finished that Baltimore game. Joe exits with a lead, can't quite hold on that lead. Great game, great effort in Baltimore, though tough. They're competing for the AFC Championship and a Super Bowl berth. I mean, Baltimore's legit. And then 7 opponents. Jake Browning completes over 70% of his passes, which once he had enough attempts, was number 1 amongst quarterbacks that had enough attempts to compete for these various things in quarterback rating. 7.97 yards per attempt, almost 8 yards per attempt, top 5 in the NFL. His quarterback rating 98.4, 7th in the NFL. I mean, Jake Browning had a heck of a run, didn't he? What was it about Jake when you guys started really working with him? And it's a different dynamic when you're getting him ready to start a football game as opposed to his role that he was filling. What did you find out about Jake Browning right away that was so impressive?
He can take it play to play. And each play is a new play and isn't impacted by something that goes negatively. Like some guys can get in a real trap where something negative happens to them and they fall into that trap where there's just a lot of negatives that continue to build up. And you really look at that Minnesota game, he threw a pick in the 3rd quarter that really, some quarterbacks that could get your head and the game's over with. And he threw the pick, and then he was able to bring us back after that and just rebound and just make good decision after good decision and find a way to help us win the game. Very similar to what Burrow did against the Houston Texans, where, he threw a pick that looked like it may take us out of it and then just led us down to some touchdowns, an opportunity to get back there and take a lead. So you look at 2 guys that really approach the game very similarly. They take it play to play. They're not impacted by something that goes wrong, and they're able to rebound and play their best as the game continues to move on. And we saw a lot of that from Jake as the season went on.
It's got to be frustrating that, with Joe missing the number of games that he missed. I mean, Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, they're in the mix again, as they usually are for the playoffs. Cincinnati Bengals have been right there with them, and they are right there with them. I mean, when Joe Burrow has been able to stay healthy, AFC Championship game, Super Bowl game. I mean, obviously, when you got number 9 at the helm, you guys are as good as anybody in the National Football League. I mean, when you just watch the conclusion of the division round here in the playoffs, what's your take? Is your take, we're right there with everybody?
Oh, sure. I mean, I don't think anybody's watching these teams thinking we can't play with them.
Yep.
If you look at San Francisco and just all these teams that we played against this year, Buffalo, Kansas City, Baltimore, Houston, all these teams, we played them.
Yep.
And we want to play in these big moments. Our team has confidence in these big moments, whether it's at home or on the road. I think it gives you good perspective to sit on your couch and watch these teams get to play in these great environments and have these great back and forth games, and how much you miss being a part of that. We don't want to do that, but you gotta take the hand that's dealt to you right now, and we're on our couch. And so let's make sure we're taking it all in and make sure we're not missing these moments again in the future, and let this motivate us, even more so going forward.
Well, one thing we know, life in the National Football League, the composition of teams never stays the same totally from 1 to 53 or 1 to 60, whatever you want to call it, with all practice squads and everything else that might be involved. Exit interviews are, a part of a necessary part of a conclusion of every season, because some players are moving on. You're going to be filling their roles with other players. And what are those exit interviews like? And when you have those exit interviews, I'm sure all of them are different, but I'm sure you get a lot of useful player feedback from players that are returning as well as players that aren't, right?
There is, and we talk about all ranges of the program that we have here, the way we practice, the way we meet, things that happen in the locker room, things that happen in the weight room, travel. There's guys you trust and that they'll give you a feedback that's going to be helpful to us winning more games. And so, I make sure that we address that with all the appropriate players. And, so I feel like we get good feedback and we ask the right questions as the season comes to a conclusion.
Players that I've talked to praise you for the way you handle those exit interviews, because their prior experiences were, it was a one-way conversation. The coach was, just handling and dictating the whole thing. He said, Zac is so good with not only delivering his message, but listening to us. He wants to hear what we have to say. I mean, and you can tell he really wants to hear what we have to say. It's not like, lip service kind of stuff. That's pretty sharp. That's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, this isn't a dictatorship, and I think you get more out of people if they feel like they're empowered and their opinion matters and they feel valued. And so again, some of the best people I've been around have made me feel that way. And so you try to do your best to let that trickle down to the coaches and the players, that they feel like they're empowered and they feel like that their voice gets to be heard. And even if you're not taking every suggestion they make, maybe it's just one out of every several that they have, you feel like everybody's a part in this and everybody has an opportunity to help this team improve. And so, but you also have to earn that right to say those things. And so again, I'm not having those conversations with everybody, but the guys that I feel like represent themselves the right way and are good leaders on this team, and I value their opinion. I want to make sure that they have the right to speak.
So now your coaching staff that has been intact for 5 years. You've had success, 3 straight winning seasons, like we said, Super Bowl appearance, AFC Championship for 2 seasons, win one and lose in another winning season. I mean, that's pretty good run of success, and your coaches are getting some attention, particularly Brian Callahan. I mean, he's having multiple second interviews. What is it like, kind of sitting there waiting for, how is this going to unfold? How much of my coaching staff will I have remaining when all this is said and done?
Yeah, I mean, as we're talking, every time my phone lights up, I'm checking it to see what the latest update is, and that's a positive thing. I think people think highly of how we've operated here and how we've conducted ourselves and the success we've had, and so with that comes a lot of attention for your coaching staff, and that's a good thing. I'd love to have the same staff here for 10 years straight. We've had an unprecedented run of 5 straight years of the same 3 coordinators, and the bulk of the staff has remained the same. And I think that's helped us have the consistency we've had. At the same time, it's I'm going to be excited when an opportunity comes Brian's way, because I know he's prepared for it, and it gives other people an opportunity. So it's just one of those things where I'd love to keep the consistency here. It's also time for those guys to get their opportunities, and Brian's the one right now who's getting a lot of second interviews, and so we'll see how it goes over the next couple of days and how it shakes out for him.
So if Brian were to get a position, say, let's just pick the Tennessee Titans. I mean, I know that's in fact, I was contacted by a talk show host there who kept me on the line for 25 minutes, and I was just extolling the virtues of Brian Callahan. They love him in Tennessee now. There's no doubt about that in Nashville. So, but if say Brian moves on to Tennessee, just to pick one of the multiple second interviews that he's got going on, and do you guys talk about, or is it premature to talk about, hey, Brian, don't be raiding my staff of everybody. I mean, it's like, I'll let you take a guy, but don't be thinking you're going to be taking a bunch of guys off my staff. Do those kind of dialogues go on at all?
Sure. I think just to have a picture of what he's thinking and how it affect me and our staff. Yeah, we have those conversations. But again, it's you have to prepare. There's candidates outside this building that you have to look at and talk to, and That'll be interesting for us if it does go that direction. So, I feel like we've got a great staff here in place, and then you get an opportunity to look and see what else is out there to see if you can always improve things. And so, again, those are some things that would take place if Brian were to get a head coaching job.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the domino effect, the ripple effect, if Brian does move on, say Tennessee, okay, fill in that coordinator position. And you got candidates internally, Coach Walters, Coach Pitcher. I mean, they may be being interviewed by, there's 7 openings still. There might be more, who knows? But they may be interviewed by not only Brian Callahan, but other coaches that fill head coaching vacancies. So, yeah, you have to have not only an internal list of what you might do from an internal standpoint with moves you might make, but that list externally. And for you having coached in the National Football League for 5 years and having the run of success now for 3 straight years, does that external list, I mean, does that grow, Coach? I mean, you're a great relationship builder. Have you made a ton of relationships that you've got now that you may not have had when you first started coaching for the Bengals?
Yeah, I think it's my responsibility to this organization to make sure that we assess all options and internally and externally, kind of weigh what the best decisions are. And so there's great people out there that I know. There's some that I'm interested to know. And I also have a lot of confidence in the guys that we have in the building. So there's a lot you got to take in, and it's not just a clear cut, this is how we're going to do it, move on. There's an interview process that'll take place that's very necessary. And so again, that's the process that we would jump into next if Brian were to leave.
Okay, so now let's move on from the coaching scenario. Yes, you got a lot of irons in the fire, Coach. I mean, there's a lot going on a daily basis, whether you're in the playoffs or not. There's no doubt about that. But now, free agency. Evaluate your own players that are entering free agency. Evaluating the pool of players from other teams that are out there in free agency. Is that a priority before the draft, or are they commingled? Are you guys preparing for the draft and free agency at the same time, or how do you handle that part of it?
Yeah, you can balance most, but you can balance at the same time. But there are priorities that jump out in front of the other, And so the number one thing is the time that you can evaluate your own free agents, and if you need to make decisions on them, you can do that before other teams can get a hold of them. And so that's always the process that we undergo, really over the next several weeks, And so Duke and his staff have been undergoing that. They've had those conversations for a long time. Now our staff gets to jump into the mix, over the next couple of weeks, and then you also balance that by watching the All-Star game tape and getting ready for the combine, and then you hit free agency, kind of at that midpoint in March. And so you can balance both. You can certainly prioritize a heavier dose of one over the other over the next 4 to 5 weeks, which we'll do. But it's exciting to get into this next stage of team building. The scheme part takes a back seat for a little bit, and you get a chance to handle the talent acquisition phase, and that's exciting. That's a new change of pace, and get something to get reinvigorated for and excited to watch, and then it turns back to the scheme once the draft ends. So I'm excited for this spring process and what takes shape there.
One of the challenges of making the championship game or the Super Bowl is your off season is so condensed, it's so short.
Yeah.
The silver lining of not making the playoffs is, it's a much longer off season. Player recovery, physically, mentally, coaches get a chance to, recharge their batteries, go out and spend some time with their families, get reconnected there, and get back into it. Does that change how you approach what you do in OTAs and training camp, and how much you might play players in the preseason since it's a longer off season, or does all that being evaluated now?
Well, I think the first part of the question is, it does change your off season. You'll get some more times because the players have had a longer recovery phase. So it looks at how you'll do things a little bit differently in the spring. We hadn't maximized all 9 weeks of the offseason process over the last 2 years because we've been playing really into February.
Right.
Now, like you mentioned, it's January 22nd. My vacation's over. I've already gone and sat on the beach, and so now you get a chance to move forward. Whereas that was happening in February in the past couple of years.
Right.
So it does change your offseason process with the players. We'll have a chance to do a little bit more with them. And then we'll evaluate where our team's at, as we look forward to training camp to see, what happened in the draft, what happened in free agency, what's the right approach for these guys. So that's not a decision we have to make today. That's something we'll base it more on how the spring goes with our guys.
Is one of the goals in the 2024-2025 season to get off to a faster start, though, and not, be 0-2, particularly last year, two division games to start the season and digging out of that 0-2 start, in the division, that's not an easy task.
No, it's not an easy task, and again, we've had some tough times that start the last couple of years. We really missed a walk-off PAT to beat the Steelers last year, and that can change the dialogue a little bit, just if that point after goes in instead of being blocked, as time expires. So again, we've got to do a better job starting fast, and we'll assess all the reasons and the things that we can maybe change to help ourselves to a faster start. And those are things that we spend a lot of time talking about.
So Joe Burrow obviously took on a role of supporting Jake Browning, did a hell of a job of it, and he was involved obviously in all the meetings and what you guys were putting together from a game plan standpoint. And he seemed to be pretty impressed what you did from a game planning standpoint with Jake Browning. Do you think that some of what you did with Jake can basically be worked on with Joe, and maybe, I don't know, not exactly the same? Quarterbacks have different strengths and weaknesses, but some of the things that you had success with Jake, do you think Joe might say, hey, that looks pretty good to me too, Coach?
Yeah, I think those are a lot of things we were doing with Joe, and people seem to forget we couldn't be under center Joe's first 4 games of the season because of his calf. There were so many things that were off the table. And so when he did get healthy against San Francisco and Buffalo, really we were doing the things that we were doing at the end of the season and having a lot of success offensively in those games against really good teams. And so these are, it wasn't a whole new offense when Jake came in there. And there's certainly some things we lean into more that Jake was really comfortable with that helped us have success. And there's some things that Joe feels more comfortable with. And so, but I think the revamping of the offense over the last couple of weeks, it's a little bit overblown. Those were things that we were doing with Joe in the 4 games that he was actually healthy in. And we'll continue to build off of that as we go forward.
Yeah, that's the exciting part. I mean, there was some success. Now maybe forget this, let's build on this, let's add to this, and all that goes on in the offseason. The fact, though, that schema, what you were putting together, Joe executed at such a high level, before injury. Jake goes in and executes at a high level. That has to just give you validation and confidence in the fact that, man, what we got cooking here is pretty good stuff. I mean, we've got some ability to be versatile with how we approach this, but yet, the same concepts, and the same beliefs that we have. That's got to be a really positive feeling for you and your coaches.
Sure. I mean, we're not necessarily looking for validation. We're just looking for ways to win. But I think we've always got to be open to evolving. And just because something was working for us well this year, you got to evaluate how to improve in the future and what tweaks can make this offense better and more consistent over the course of the season. And so again, that's just our job, and that's what we're excited to do, and continue to move forward in 2024 and have a really good year.
And finally, Coach, and appreciate you carving the time you carved. I know you've got responsibilities with the family with this time, and we don't want to infringe upon any of that. But this is Lou Anarumo's bailiwick, and I know you guys talk all the time, and you guys are very close, coaches as well as friends. And Lou's talked about it, point blank. We gave up too many explosives. I mean, we gave up over 80 plays of 20 yards or more. We led the league in explosive 30 yards or more. If that can be curtailed some, that makes a big difference to both sides of the ball, doesn't it?
It does, and it was too many, and you get into a laundry list of reasons why. But it's something that we'll certainly look to improve upon this offseason and be ready to hit the ground running when the season comes around. But it is something that we'll spend a lot of time and effort rectifying, and that is where complementary football comes into play. We need to do a better job early in games on offense to take the pressure off the defense. So, we force teams to be more one-dimensional, and that's where you can really tee off on defense and limit the explosives and dictate the game better than what we did this year. And so I just felt like, the complementary aspect of playing well in all 3 phases wasn't where we needed it to be this year to take the pressure off of each side of the ball. And that's something I got to do a better job as a head coach, making sure we can force teams to be more one-dimensional there.
Coach, you've done a heck of a job building your football team in free agency, and then whatever holes are left to build, in the draft. All 8 of your draft picks had a role, and that role was expanded during the season last year. You guys have put your bat on the ball so well in free agency and the draft. Has to give you a lot of confidence going into this offseason.
It does, but I mean, we have a lot of confidence in Duke Tobin and his staff. You know, Steve Radicevich, Trey Brown, Mike Potts, you know, Christian Sarkeesian, and Andrew Johnson. Those guys just do such an excellent job that allow us to do our job. And so we trust their opinions, and of course they let us supplement with our opinions. It's a really good process that we have here in the building. The communication is we don't bring people in that people are dissatisfied with or that we don't have a vision for. And so Duke's done a really good job of driving that bus and making sure that we add the right players and there's consensus there. And so again, I think they did a great job with this draft class. All 8 of those guys, we have a great vision for. They all played a role for us this year. We all think they have even more potential. You didn't go through a season thinking, man, we might have missed on this guy. You didn't feel that for 1 second with these guys. So I think the future is very bright for that draft class.
No doubt, man. They're all made of the right stuff, and man, it's working. You guys are doing it well. Coach, appreciate your time. Can't thank you enough. Good stuff as always. And I'm ready for 2024. I'm ready now.
Me too.
It's enough of a break. Let's tee it up. Let's kick it off. Appreciate you, sir.
You bet. I'm gonna go jump in this car line now.
I love it. Parent pickup time at school. I love it, Coach. You're the best. Thank you.
Okay. See you, Dave.
See ya. Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realize self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
Opportunity knocking.